First, we'll take a look at the box. If this looks familiar to you, it's because I have made a video about this before. But this will be a more in-depth video. And in case you don't know what I'm talking about or haven't seen the other video, this is the box for an original Macintosh 512. And this is the Macintosh 512. I've set it up on a desk here for demonstration purposes and as a conversation piece. So let's talk about it, shall we? Now, the Mac 512, as I said before, was the second version of the Macintosh. The original Macintosh, released in 1984, and is poorly documented in the new Jobs movie, which we'll talk about. The original Mac was too small. It only had 128 megabytes of RAM, was not expandable, had a standard keyboard without a numeric keypad. Is this sounding familiar or what? And it had no options for external expansion other than... I'm sorry, I should take that back. It did have one floppy port. There were no external hard drives at the time of its release, but later on one had become available. It used a standard telephone cord, handset type cable to plug the keyboard in, but that's not really important right now. The 128 proved to be very limited in its abilities, and people were quite angry about its lack of luster. It was the first affordable computer to be targeted to the masses with a graphical user interface, and in that it was groundbreaking. It was very small, it was a compact machine, it was very powerful, it had excellent graphics, monochromatic graphics, but they were very sharp for that time period. So Apple, in response to the 128's limitations, upgraded the machine to the Mac 512, and they were actually available concurrently, if I recall, or if my research is right. You could buy a 128 or a 512 in 1985. Now, Apple realized very quickly that the 512 was limited in its own right. It had no SCSI port in the back, which was becoming a thing because more people were demanding external storage, and they wanted it to be fast enough to be somewhat productive. So they started adding SCSI ports to their machines in the form of the Macintosh Plus, which was released in 1986, if I recall. The 512 was released in about 1985. The exact dates are available online if you so care to read them. The SE followed the Mac Plus. The SE30 followed the SE. And at some point, I believe it was the original SE was available with or without a hard drive, and the hard drive model was the SEFDHD. For those of you looking for fun facts, that's a fun fact. It is extremely fun to know that, which is why they call that a fun fact. Now, let's talk about this machine. As I mentioned, the Mac Plus was the successor to the 512. Remember that. This Mac 512 I purchased from a friend, and we have been in negotiations for approximately 2 years prior to my actually buying it. Originally he wanted a ton of money for it. He had a plotter to go with it, an original Apple plotter. So if anyone is interested in an original Apple plotter for a fair price, I don't have a price, but make me an offer, not me, make it to him. I will get you in contact with the gentleman trying to sell the plotter. He wanted crazy money for it, in my opinion. Well, more than I was... Alright, let me rephrase that. That would sound very nice. He wanted more money than I was willing to pay at the time. And I don't need a plotter. But a side issue. If you want an original Apple plotter, send me a private message or throw something in the comment box, and I will get in touch with him, and maybe we can start something there. But anyway, I decided I wasn't going to buy the plotter. I would buy the actual 512 and the original box and everything that goes with it for a fair price. Actually, I paid basically what I consider to be a reseller's price, not a collector's price. I didn't pay the some $200 that this machine is probably worth. I paid significantly less than that. So, that having been said, it took 2 years to acquire this machine, so I was happy as a clam to get it. But there was one thing that neither the seller nor I was aware of at the time we were talking about me acquiring this system. I didn't notice it until I looked through the paperwork, and then I looked at the machine a little closer. One of the things that Apple used to do back in the 1980s was actually care about their customers. And in that, if you bought a machine that was outdated the minute you walked out the door, like the 512 here, they would offer you an upgrade plan. Not a plan, but a package, if you will. If you brought your Mac 512 or 128 back to any Apple store, well, they didn't have Apple stores then, but they had dealers. You bring it back to any Apple dealer, authorized Apple dealer, they would upgrade that machine for you at a price, but it was still cheaper than buying a new one. You got to remember, a Mac Plus, I believe, retailed for somewhere around $900 to $1,200, and the 512, I'm not really sure. I think it was around the same price. I could be wrong. We should probably look up the prices later, but let's just continue and steamroll on, shall we? But what they would do is they would literally replace the motherboard. Now, actually, all right, I should start over. There were several upgrade options for the 512 owner, and the first option was to replace a couple of system ROMs and bring it to the 512k enhanced, which allowed you to run newer versions of macOS. The versions escape my mind at the moment. That was one option. There was another option. They could replace the motherboard and the floppy drive. And that would give you the ability to read 800k floppy diskettes. Mind you, the original floppy drive could only read and write to 400 kilobyte floppy disks. A 400k floppy disk is a standard, well, basically a single-sided 800k floppy, which is why you can use 800k floppies in a 400k drive if they're formatted at 400k. So this upgrade package, included the motherboard, the floppy drive, and one other key critical component, the entire rear shell of the machine. So this, which has the Mac 512 faceplate and lower chassis assembly, actually has a Mac Plus rear case. This was a very popular upgrade for the 512 owner. This was the most expensive upgrade you could buy. It had everything with it. There was one lower version where you just replace the motherboard, and that's it. And you could use an external 800k floppy disk if you wanted to. But in this case, it had the full meal deal, the whole kit and caboodle, if you will. So what we have here is a factory authorized or dealer authorized upgraded machine, so it's not like a homebrew hack or anything. And I have the documentation to prove it, and I'll show it to you. So it's kind of a bastard of a machine, but it is what it is. And I did not know that when I bought it until I started. Actually, no, when we had negotiated the price. Afterwards, I had noticed it, but I was okay with it because it is still a piece of history. It is still all Apple. I mean, it's not like this is an aftermarket upgrade or anything. This is OEM. The other option you could get with the Mac Plus upgrade, which I actually have, is the Macintosh Plus extended keyboard. Now this here was available to anyone. Actually, I believe you could use this on any 512, but it was still part of the package if you bought the 512 upgrade kit to the Mac Plus. But this particular keyboard was purchased after the fact because it's not on the original invoice. Let me just open this up here. This is just a standard Mac Plus keyboard. So here's the original sales slip. This was purchased on 7/13 of 1988 for the price of $96.75. So if you think $50 for a keyboard is high, well, okay. In all fairness, $50 is high for today's market. But back then, $96 for a keyboard was pretty reasonable. Some keyboards are a lot more than that. But here we are, an original Mac Plus keyboard with cord. It has some signs of wear, but not terrible. And let's look at the color. I don't believe it's the same color as this keyboard. Kind of hard with this light. This is a bad light to judge color with, but it's pretty much the same color. So that's interesting. But there you are. This is the extended keyboard option. If you didn't want to buy this keyboard, you had an opportunity to buy an external keypad, which I have. I'm not going to show it to you because it's kind of buried in that box and I don't want to dig it out. But I have the matching external numeric keypad that sits next to this keyboard. So that's that. This is the original mouse. You can tell by the color of the button. The newer mice are a platinum color. They're a little bit lighter. And the button is, I believe it's a lighter color than that. Sort of a grayish color. And the retaining ring on the bottom is white. So that's how you can kind of tell whether it's an original mouse or not. The disk drive is manufactured by a different company, so the plastics have aged differently than the rest of the plastics. It's a lighter color, and it hasn't really turned this yellowish color as much as the machine has. In this drawer, I have a couple of things I want to show you. This is the Macintosh System Accessory Pack. It includes an unopened training, yeah, it is still sealed. This is the, excuse me, the guided tour of Macintosh and Mac Write. And there's a companion floppy diskette that goes with it, so you can learn how to use those two applications with an audio guide. Here is a system contents brochure. And the only thing I'm missing from this original content list, besides the original motherboard and case, back, and floppy drive, the only thing I'm missing is actually the owner's manual. I don't have the owner's manual. But other than that, it's all here. I also noticed I've got the wrong power cord. You'll notice my power cord angles upward. That is not the right power cord. I have one upstairs though. I do have the correct one somewhere. Original software. All of these discs are original to the machine and they are complete. The only problem is the Mac Write and Mac Paint guided tour doesn't work. And the Mac Write disk does not work, but the backup does. So I will be able to repair that diskette. Actually, I still can. But what I've done instead is what anyone with plastic stuff lying around like this should do, is buy yourself some new old stock floppy diskettes, and use, like these right here, and use those to make backup copies of all of your system diskettes, because they will go bad. The original ones are only good for like 10 years. These are almost 30 years old, and they're going bad fast. So I have a copy of all of my system disks, Mac Paint, Guided Tour, Mac Write, and Mac Paint. and the system disk, which is in the drive. So how do you handle a machine with 400k floppy disks in a world like today? Well, it's not easy. You want to make sure that you have a working external 800k floppy drive, first of all, which I have one. It's in storage right now. Both of the internal 800k drive and the external 400k drive are fully functional. I'm using the external 400 because it is the right drive for this machine. It's the one that came with it. I even have the box for this too. So you want to use that, or I want to use it. It's a single-sided, I believe it's made by Sony. And you can use that as your system boot-up drive. And for anything else that requires an 800k diskette, these are all formatted 400k, and my games are still 800k. So when I boot this off the internal drive, or the external drive, let me turn this light off. No need to have that on. And while we're booting up, I'm going to show you the sales slip that shows the upgrade package that's done to it and when it was done. Oh yeah, I've got some of these too. The original Apple stickers. By the way, we're booting up System 1. I don't know exactly which flavor it is, but it is one of the original versions of Mac OS. I'm going to show you a couple of things that are different. But this was done at Computer Mart in Nashua, New Hampshire. It has the Mac Plus upgrade and the Mac peripheral adapter cable. The upgrade was $599 when it was done. It was done on 9/30 of 87. So there's that. And this right here is I believe a sales receipt for $616 for the Mac Plus upgrade. Probably like a work order or something like that. Pretty cool. Okay. Believe it or not, I bought this desk for the sole purpose of using this machine. I'm going to turn the brightness down a little bit. For those of you classic Mac owners or any older system that you have lying around, it's best to run the brightness as low as possible to stress out the circuitry less, or to reduce the strain on the circuitry and to reduce the likelihood of burn-in. As you know, these parts are unobtainium for a lot of this stuff, so it's kind of critical that you take care of it as best you can. I'm going to show you something that, and I mentioned this earlier, but the Jobs movie is a disaster. If you haven't seen it, don't waste your time. The movie sucks. I saw it in Burbank, California, before it was released across the U.S., because they get early releases of every movie, basically. And I'm telling you right now, I would have been better off saving the $20-some the movie cost me to see, and not actually seeing it at all, or waiting for it to go on Netflix. I'll be honest with you, if you want to see an excellent, historically accurate movie on the history of the microcomputer industry, I highly recommend Pirates of Silicon Valley. To date, it is the best movie, it is the most accurate, and it actually covers both sides, the Apple and the Microsoft side. It also covers a little bit of the Altair, and I believe Commodore might be mentioned as well. Do not waste your money on Jobs. I mean, I will say that Ashton Kutcher's performance was pretty decent, but you can tell he has no vested interest in the historical accuracy of his performance. Not only that, but the researchers did a terrible job. I'm going to show you one thing, and if you do watch the movie, I want you to pay attention to this. When they demonstrate the original Macintosh as being, they were doing like the, welcome to Macintosh thing. I believe it was Steve Jobs, Ashton Kutcher, showing this to, I don't remember who, like press release, I don't know what the hell it was. Watch closely. Now, what he's going to do in the movie is he's going to open the control panel. And he is going to change the desktop background, or he shows the control panel. The control panel that they show you is system, I believe it is system 6, possibly system 7. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's system 7. And I know this because I've used every version of Mac OS since system 1. And it is not the right version. Not many people are going to notice this, but I did. And you will too. But this is what the original control panel looks like. Notice the desktop background changer is here. Okay. Not up here where they show it. But this is what the original version of macOS looks like. And there are several backgrounds, by the way. A lot of the ones made it up until System 7, which is pretty cool. There are other historical inaccuracies, like I don't believe Steve Wozniak ever worked on the Macintosh team. I don't think he was ever allowed to. He was Apple II all the way. Let's see, what else did I find? Oh, I was just laughing throughout the whole thing. It is a funny movie. I mean, I'll give it that. It's hilarious. I think the only thing they got right was a startup chime, for God's sakes. But anyway, this allows you to control the mouse speed. Actually, no, that's not the right one. Yeah, this is the mouse speed control here. That slows it down, and that speeds it up. Yeah, okay, great. This is the keyboard repeat rate. The cursor flash rate. Oops. Double click speed. Slow, fast. Very Spartan. I mean, there really isn't a whole lot here to change. I am going to figure out which version this is because I'm kind of curious. But it has the scrapbook. Let's take a look at the scrapbook. Gotta love those multi-speed drives. A lot of this stuff, again, made it all the way into System 7, but this one, no, not necessarily. Some of these are new. I don't recall seeing these before. Well, new is in there. Old. Old is in there. New. Whatever. Shut up. Let's take a look at some old applications. Mac Paint. By the way, the Mac Paint disk is bootable. So if I were to restart the machine with only the Mac Paint disk in it, you got to remember now, these machines were designed to be used by people who are migrating away from the Apple II. So a lot of this stuff is quite similar. I'm going to eject the system disk. Watch this. Drag it to the trash bin. Not so fast. File, eject, or Command E. And there we go. Now, another thing I want to show you guys, there is no shutdown command at all. There is no way to shut this machine down. The shutdown command is on the back. There is no restart, there is no shutdown. Now we're going to boot it off of the Mac Paint diskette on the internal drive. This is the 800k drive. Watch. You'll notice that it comes up with a system finder that you would normally see. One other thing I want to point out is because the internal clock battery is missing, I took it out because it is a leak hazard. It doesn't save any settings. The clock settings, the desktop background, anything that's stored in the, I believe it's stored in EEPROM, or in ROM, but that'll be read-only. It's stored somewhere in there, yeah, whatever. Yeah, been a long day. So we're going to open up Paint, and open up that, there we go. This is the original version of Mac Paint. Let's see what version it is. It is version 1.4. And it has a picture of the creator, Bill Atkinson. Okay. I should have a copy of Mac Write here. Oh, I have it with Mac Paint. So we're going to take a look at Mac Write. And we're going to shut this down. Honestly, the only thing you need to do is eject your disk and shut the thing off. That's pretty much the end of it. The menu hasn't really changed a whole lot. I mean, at least the basic layout. So let's stick our Mac Write Mac Paint diskette in there. Shut it down. I have to mention, though, just off the cuff here, but the CRT and analog board in this machine are absolutely superb. It has one of the most crisp, laser-sharp CRTs on any compact Mac I've ever seen, which is very interesting because this computer shows signs of being used quite heavily, but on the other hand, it doesn't. It's almost as if some of these parts have been replaced at one point. I wouldn't be surprised, but take a look at Mac Write. This is the precursor to iWork Notepad. And this is it, man. Let's type a few characters. And this is what made the Mac wonderful. WYSIWYG. You can change the font. They're here. You can add fonts, you can remove fonts, and you can change them, and what you see is what you get. That's what's printed on the printer. That is what Steve Jobs was obsessing over. Fonts. And it was actually a brilliant move on his behalf. One thing the real Steve Jobs was, he was a brilliant man. He knew what people wanted, and he knew how to market it towards them so they would buy it. He was not an engineer. He probably should have been an industrial designer at some point in his life, but he wasn't. But anyway, and that's it. Pretty much, that's what your machine came with. We'll take a look at the guided tour. It's not really necessary, but we can, if you want to. Oh yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that. So let's go ahead and boot it off the system disk, and then we're going to run the guided tour. Also, I want to show you guys the difference between an old-fashioned manual inject floppy and an automatic inject. Inject, you say? Yes. The injection process, the process that takes the disk into the drive. You'll notice, and I just wanted to point this out. Let me get the light on here. Okay. You'll notice that on this original 400k drive, you have to push the disk into the drive. On the newer 800k drives, it sucks it in for you. It's kind of a bit of a... I noticed it. Some people won't, but okay. Now let's restart. You can actually set the startup disk. Oh yeah, when you eject a disk, it still shows up here as a grayed out disk. You have to still manually drag that to the trash bin. Oh, that's the startup disk, isn't it? Well then, let's restart. Let's see which one it starts from. Yeah, it goes for the internal one first. Damn it. Alright. Here's the guided tour. Time to play the maze. This was a necessary program because People didn't know how to use mice. Oh, what's it doing? For some reason my camera stopped recording and this thing isn't working. Let's try that again. Okay. Show me my electronic desk. Oh, it's not working, is it? Interesting. Could be bad. Could be another bad disk. Wouldn't surprise me. So what do? Nothing. You can't eject the disk. Maybe if I hold down the Command E key while I'm turning it on, I can eject it. I haven't tried that yet. No, that's not working either. Let me use my Macintosh. Well, that works. I'm going to go ahead and pop that out. Eject. I gotta fix that. I had to make some adjustments to this drive to make it work, so it pops them out like a toaster now. Alright, training. About the Finder. This is what the About the Finder screen used to look like. Version 1.1H is the version of the Finder on this disk. Let's try the mousing around applet. Oh, you have to watch it do the whole demonstration, and it'll probably do like a, now you try. Believe it or not, you actually had to have a program that shows you how to use a mouse. Back in the old days, it was a new thing. Nobody really knew about mice. People didn't have them, and it was a whole new world. Now it wants me to play Connect the Dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. Yay! I win. I can now play the piano. Continue. Get to drag them around. Nice. Alright, while we're on the subject of mice, this chunky thing is a pain in the neck to use because it's just not right, man. It's definitely crude. I will give it that. It works, but it's crude. I'm trying to give this mouse some cheese here. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Eat the cheese. There we go. Okay. Well, I guess that concludes our video. So, yeah.